Financial crime enables criminals to reap the benefits of their illicit activities. If they are unable to access the proceeds of the crimes that they carried out, they'd be much less likely to carry them out in the first place. And these activities include things like human trafficking, drug trafficking, exploiting vulnerable people. It was only last year that a lorry was found in Essex, with the bodies of 39 people in it, after a failed attempt to smuggle them into the UK. We as Baringa are committed to reducing financial crime and the negative consequences it has on society. And we believe that the financial services industry is uniquely placed in order to help prevent criminals from reaping the benefits of their illicit activities. And we work with financial institutions across the industry in order to help them to be more effective at achieving this aim. Our aim with the top 10 is to establish a benchmark of the most prevalent ways for laundering money so they can be mitigated more effectively. Within the cybersecurity domain, an organisation called OWASP established a top 10 benchmark of the most common software vulnerabilities that lead to a cyber attack. This has been very effective at raising awareness of these vulnerabilities within the financial services industry as well as other sectors. Our hope is to achieve something similar within the financial crime domain. Our approach to this exercise was to compile a long list of financial crime topologies based on our team's experience of working in financial crime investigations. We then corroborated these topologies based on publicly available examples of financial crime. And then we surveyed financial institutions across the globe, asking them to rank each of the topologies according to how common they think they are, and to assess how effective their organisation is at mitigating each of the topologies. The infographic shown here includes all of the topologies on the long list mentioned earlier. It's intended to represent the interconnected nature of these topologies, as they're rarely carried out in isolation. We don't pretend that this is an exhaustive list of all of the ways in which money can be laundered, but hopefully it is representative of the main ways that criminals launder money through the financial services system. The pink triangles on the diagram indicate which of these topologies fall in the top 10. And this infographic is available in the Baringa Top 10 Financial Crime Risk Report, so that it's possible for you to have a look at it in a bit more detail. Before we come on to the top 10, it's probably just worth explaining a bit more detail what we mean by a topology. You'll notice that I use the words topology and risk. What I mean by topology is the means by which money is laundered, whereas a risk is a topology an organisation is actually exposed to. So for example, cash deposits is a common topology, but many insurers wouldn't be exposed to that topology as a risk because of the fact that they don't deal in cash. To go into a bit more detail about specific topology then, money mules is a common topology within financial services. Effectively a third-party individual's account, where the individual may or may not be complicit, is used in order to deposit funds which are then transferred on to the criminals. So for example, an individual might be asked to deposit £5,000 in cash, and for carrying out this transaction they're allowed to keep £250 of that before they transfer it on. There are a number of red flags which might alert an organisation that this topology is being carried out. So for example, if a student basic bank account is being used in order to deposit a value of funds which is incommensurate with the income of the individual who holds the account, that might be a good indicator that this topology is being carried out. And fairly recently this example was employed in Ireland, where 200 different accounts were being used to launder €2 million worth of funds, and in this particular example the deposits made were between £5,000 and £35,000 or the equivalent of that. So let's get into the details of which topologies made it into the top 10 financial crime risks. The first is straight up cash deposits. This is still a very common way of laundering money. We'll have to see whether post-COVID that still remains to be the case. It may be a lot more conspicuous if people are depositing lots of cash when consumers have moved away from that. Second, we have cash deposits through third-party channels. These might be things like non-bank ATM networks or through organisations such as the post office. It's often assumed that such channels have equivalent controls in place for ID&V for the depositors of funds. However, this is actually in reality often not the case, and as a result may be quite an attractive way for criminals to launder money. Next we have the use of mules, which we've already covered. This is one of the most common topologies. In fact, in retail banking it is the number one way for laundering money. Fourth, we have the use of money services businesses. Often such organisations will have weaker controls in place for validating the originator and beneficiary of transactions, and so by doing business with money services businesses, organisations may inadvertently expose themselves to greater financial crime risk if they haven't checked that equivalent controls are in place within those organisations. Fifth, we have the use of complex corporate structures in order to hide the nature of transactions. This has received a lot more attention since cases like the Panama Papers, and so it does appear that organisations are now much more aware that it's going on. Sixth, we have the use of gambling outlets. There was a big example of this where Chinese nationals attempting to avoid capital controls would transfer money into a specified bank account within China and then travel to Vancouver, where they would be presented with the funds in a bag of cash. They'd take that cash into the local casino, where they would purchase chips and then cash out for what would then appear to be clean funds. Seventh, we have direct cash deposits into another individual's account. Effectively, this has been used, for example, in a case in the US where criminals who were selling prescription drugs on the black market would ask the buyers of those drugs to make deposits directly into their bank accounts, and so there were deposits being made from all over the US into their bank accounts to pay for these prescription drugs. Eighth, we have structuring, quite a well-known topology within financial crime. Effectively, the value of transactions is broken up into smaller amounts, and the smaller deposits are made into accounts which are perceived to avoid reporting thresholds or limits that might be subject to greater scrutiny. Ninth, we have control of another person's deposit funds. This is often used in human trafficking, so where, for example, you may have a handler accompany an individual into a bank branch and instruct them as to what transactions they need to carry out. And then 10th, we have the use of high-value assets to transfer value. Because cash is often subject to greater scrutiny and can be quite difficult to move in large quantities, criminals will use high-value goods such as jewellery or used cars in order to transfer value instead. So, for example, they might purchase those goods in cash in one country and then ship them to another country where they can be redeemed for clean funds. So that's a quick run through of the top 10 most prevalent financial crime risks. If financial institutions to focus on these risks more specifically, they will become much more effective at reducing financial crime. You can find further details on the top 10 in Baringa's Top 10 Financial Crime Risk Report. Thank you for watching.